Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed, pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today we have a very special podcast with a very special podcast guest, parenting together through imprints and wounds with the exceptional Lael Stone. Welcome, Lael.
Thanks. Hi.
So we're really excited to have conversations around what it looks like to parent with different ideas, what it looks like to parent through and with your own wounding as well as your partner's, and what it looks like when you're owning your own story or not, and perhaps that dynamic gets played out by your kids. So super juicy, super incredible conversations as part of Relationship Taboo series. We're talking about what does this look like to be working together with family, with relationship, and with conscious parenting, and they get to be together rather than separate. So really excited to have that conversation.
We are. Now, as a champion of connection and creating harmony in families, Lael Stone is an educator, TEDx speaker, author, mother, and parenting counsellor who's been working with families for over 17 years. As an aware parenting instructor, she facilitates workshops and support groups that empower parents to create connections and stronger relationships with their children. Lael spent 15 years working in childbirth education and postnatal care, working with couples through pregnancy, birth, and the first few years of parenting as a doula, calm birth practitioner, and postnatal trauma counsellor. She is the creator and director of the About Birth online education program, a pioneering way to learn about birth and early parenting. She is also the co-creator of Woodline Primary School, an innovative new school based on emotional well-being and connection. Lael is the co-host of the Aware Parenting podcast and a sought-after public speaker who talks candidly about her experiences and her great passion, creating wellness in families through connection and communication. She is excited to be teaming up with the Resilience Project to deliver presentations around raising resilient children all over Australia in 2021. She is the mother of 3 big kids who are teenagers and young adults, and she is currently putting all her research into practice with them. So great to have you here. We feel so honoured to have you as part of our podcast again. We did have you on a couple of years ago, and it's lovely to have you back again.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Do you know the podcast we did years ago? I have people who I still talk to now going, I remember when you talked about teenagers on that podcast with Julie and Bridget, and I've always remembered that. It's made me think about, wow, there is another way to raise teens. So thank you guys for having me back, because I remember I have had a lot of people still, say, I remember listening to that, and it landed for me. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
How cool is that?
That's so cool. We love that. I remember recording that, and that was, I think I had like a 3 or a 4-year-old then, and it was like mind blown. So I think I love that, you've taken people on that journey and that they find their way to you too when they get to that age.
Yeah. It's bizarre. Like, my son just turned 21. He's an adult. He's his own being. He comes and goes these days. And I look at it sometimes and I think, how did I get here 21 years down the track of having adult children? And yet I just more than anything, I see what I often talk about with parenting is I see the fruits of it in who they are as young adults. And I think that for me is really powerful of so much of what we can talk about, particularly toddlers or school age kids. And we're like, yeah, but what does that look like down the track? And I feel really blessed to have been on this journey for a while to actually see that, in who they are as beautiful young adults. It's beautiful to see.
So we would love to really begin this discussion with, first of all, framing it that we brought you on to talk about relationship taboos, being that in relationship you are going to hit lots of emotional, psychic, wounding, because you're going to see parts of your partner that you perhaps never saw before because they're seeing themselves through their child. And then you're seeing them through your children together. And sometimes that can be really hard to be with, hard to understand, I suppose hard to forge a path together with if you're a mother listening and you value conscious parenting, which is the bulk of our listeners. So we know that you have an enormous body of work and practice in this area. So we'd love to hear how you personally came to want to aware parent and what that looked like for you to bring your husband on that journey, and then how you would open up or offer other women to consider bringing their partners on that journey with them.
We got like about 5 hours.
Yeah.
We know it's a super layered, super complex. I guess one of the main problems, and I imagine you would see it too, is the different parenting ideas or the reality of, whoa, I've come screaming into this person that I don't recognize. And this is not in alignment with this now shared human that we're raising. And what do we do?
Yeah, it's so big. And I would say probably... look, 3/4 of the parents that I work with come because of this, because we're on different pages and it's not always classically this way, but often what I have seen, and again, I'm doing a bit of a blanket thing here, but it's not always the way. Perhaps mum is feeling a bit more permissive in her parenting. She wants everything to be okay, wants it to be calm. Perhaps dad feels that, there's not enough boundaries and our kids are going to grow up entitled. So they kind of use a lot of power over more of that authoritarian stuff. And then there's often a big clash and then the kids are in the middle going, whoa, what's going on here? And here's this button I can push and yours. And let's get some stuff happening, parents, at looking at your own stuff. I think for me personally, I often always talk about that I went into mothering with a belief system that I had to keep my kids happy all the time. So I just didn't know how to deal with feelings and emotions. So I thought that if they were happy, then that meant I was a good mum, I was doing a good job. And so therefore, I just spent most of my time trying to make sure that I could meet my kids' needs, which, and for anyone who does that will know, is so exhausting. It's impossible, firstly, and it's really, really exhausting. So I really sat on the permissive place of just, I want to keep everybody happy. And therefore I was exhausted because I had no limits or boundaries for myself. I didn't take care of myself. I was ending up becoming a very resentful mother because all I felt like I was doing was trying to keep everyone happy all the time. Now, my beautiful husband, he came in with, he was super, super fun dad. So part of him was always like, yeah, we'll keep everyone happy. But whenever he felt like he was being disrespected or felt like I was being too lenient on them, he would come in over the top. And that's where we would often clash. And so, I was always like, I need to protect the kids and make sure they're okay. Not that he was ever, aggressive or violent or anything with the kids, but he just came in with like, no, that's the rules. That's how we're doing it. And so I was like, no, but that doesn't feel safe. And then, but like the kids are running all over us. And, so there was this real dance between us, and we probably sat in that dynamic for about 7 or 8 years. And, we had children young, we got together young. Like it was an intense time. Like we both look back at that time when we had young kids and think, wow, it's pretty lucky that we actually got through it. Because what was really happening in most of those years was all my wounds were popping up, all his wounds were popping up, and we didn't have the support or the wisdom or the know-how to navigate it. So we just kept bouncing off each other. And then, we didn't fight a lot, but really what was going on for me as a mother was, you don't understand how hard it is. I'm doing all the work here. He was doing the whole, you don't understand how hard it is. I'm trying to earn all the money. Like we basically played the game of who's doing it tougher. no one wins in that game of who's doing it tougher. And so, and how it played out is that I would just then struggle even more because I was waiting for him to come home and say, gosh, that looks so hard. How about you take a break? And he was really waiting for me to validate, I can see how you're working really hard to fix, you know, our financial issues or whatever. And we both just kept totally missing. And so I think what changed it, well, what definitely changed it is when we had our third child. So our oldest was 7.5, and then we had a 4-year-old. And when I had a third child, I had a really traumatic, pretty powerful birth experience where it was a big life and death theme that went on, and it kind of leveled everything because we just went to a place of, wow, we all went through a really big trauma. And when we came out the other side of that trauma, I remember thinking things have to change. Like, we cannot keep going on this way because it's not healthy for either of us. And really our intimacy was not there, and we were both just so deeply in our wounds. And that's when I discovered the work of aListen and read the book The Aware Baby, and that point absolutely changed my life because I realized that what I'd been doing is avoiding my kids' feelings and emotions. I realized I was not having any boundaries or limits and taking care of myself. Like, everything just exploded because I began to see that I had become my mum. My husband had become his dad. And we were in a relationship together and it didn't feel good. And so it was from there that I went, whoa, we got some work to do here. We have to look at what our belief systems are. And what I really believe is we were searching for it, but we just hadn't found it. And I think that's the thing. Both of us kind of knew what we wanted in our family. We really wanted it to be democratic. We didn't ever want to smack our kids. Like, we always wanted it to be deeply respectful with our children, but we just didn't have the tools to know how to do it. And then I think when I found the work of aListen, it gave me a foundation to go, oh, wow, this is what having limits could look like. And this is what it can look like listening to feelings. And there is no such thing as naughty or bad behavior. It's just a child with some stuff going on. And so huge learning curve. And my husband, bless him, is always so willing whenever I say to him, hey, I think we should do this, or I'm looking at that. And he never reads books, but what often makes me laugh about him is he goes, you just give me the top level, and I kind of give him the main points, and then he goes, right, good. So he feels like he's read the book, even though he hasn't. And then my favorite part is then he goes and talks to everyone else about it, like he's read the book and done the work. And I just sit there and we have a giggle about that all the time. He even admits that. He's like, yeah, you do all the work and then tell me, and then I go pretend it's mine. So what was beautiful is that he was willing to go, yeah, okay, let's give this a go because it's not working. And so and I say this to parents all the time, if there's a door open to lean into looking at some of the story and the work, then you just start with that and then see where it goes. And, you know, there was many times in the beginning when we first started Aware Parenting where instead of trying to shut our kids' feelings down or distract them from them or try and keep them happy, you know, we would just sit and listen. It was the beginning part of actually going, wow, there's, you know, you have story and let me listen to it. And many times my husband would look at me and he's like, is this going to work? Like, what we're doing feels so foreign because none of our friends were doing it. Is this going to work? And I would say to him, I just, you know, my gut says yes, because this is what I would have wanted if I was 7, or this is how I would have been wanted to be responded to if I was 3, you know, and from there, I think we both just began to then see how our kids shifted and changed, and then how our dynamic shifted and changed. And then, you know, we kept going, and, you know, there's not a part of us that looks back and just thinks that wasn't just the biggest blessing in our life to get that information and to do the work so we could actually, you know, shift and move forward.
I absolutely love how relatable you made all of that. Like, just I just think there's something so beautiful about seeing yourself in someone else's story and going, oh my gosh, yeah, I went through that too. Or, yeah, I experienced that as well. And there's this part of you that just has this soothing validation for, oh my gosh, so it's still possible for me to end up where Lael has ended up because she's traveled that path too. Like, I really love that you took us there, because I think that is soul medicine for so many mums.
I say this all the time whenever I do talks. Every bad thing you could have thought or done, I have so totally done that. There is no perfect. And you know, those first 7 or 8 years where I really wasn't parenting very consciously at all. I mean, I was still attuned to my kids' needs, but I look back on that time and think I was just not there because I was not getting any of my needs met at all. But I see that as just such a gift because I really believe that often we need to have the contrast. We need to see how uncomfortable it feels or what it looks like in order to lean towards what we do want. And those years, I think, gifted me so much because I then looked at my son and my daughter who were, you know, 7 and 4 and realized, God, I'd spent a lot of time shutting their feelings down or not listening to them. And so from there, I was like, wow, we need to do a lot of repair here. We need to find ways to create space to heal whatever wasn't listened to or perhaps the stuff that I did really unconsciously. And again, I have so much compassion for myself. I was doing the best job I knew how, like we all are, you know, and so I think I've seen the fruits of that. I've seen the fruits that it's never too late to heal. No matter when you come to this place in your parenting journey, it's never, ever, ever too late to start listening, to start looking at yourself, to start connecting. Because as soon as you have that willingness and you can open up a possibility for it, then it comes in its own perfect timing. And so I feel so deeply grateful for the really, really hard bits because it's taught me so much.
Thank you.
That's a great point to labour too, that it's never too late to heal, because I certainly know with so many mothers, you know, the guilt is so real that plagues mothering, right? It's part of the narrative. And so to know that whatever age we might come to greater consciousness in our parenting, there's room for us and for our child to heal that and for our child to not feel like something's missing.
Yeah, totally. And it's, you know, it has taught me so much about trust. Like this whole parenting journey or doing it in I guess the way that I look at it has the underpinning of all of it is about trusting our journey and trusting our children's journey, and that there's going to be stuff that's going to be painful and there's going to be stuff that we don't get right, and there's going to be times where we respond to our kids in ways that we don't want to. And I've had to really learn to trust their own unique journey of where they are and what they're here to do on the earth. And sometimes that plays out in uncomfortable ways. And it doesn't mean that we don't do our best. Of course, we need to. And I think at the end of the day, every parent wants to be a deeply connected parent. I think that's what we all strive to do. But trusting what our kids need to do to learn and to find their own journey has been, for me, probably the biggest golden nugget, to be able to say, look, they've got their own path. I cannot protect them from all the hurts that the world may offer. But what I can do is let them know that I am here and I am so rock solid, and whatever goes on for them, I'm here with my arms open saying, hey, lean into me. I've got you and I believe in you and I believe in your ability to navigate hard things, but I'm here. I've got you. And that letting go and trusting of their journey is, to me, probably one of the most profound things you can do as a parent.
I love that so much. How would you, I don't want to say advise, how would you enter the conversation around cultivating willingness in a non-willing partner?
Oh, that's hard, isn't it? It's tricky. It's really tricky. And so I always come back to this first of that we are all doing the best job we know how. You know, I have a saying that we are always coming from protection, which means that if your partner is powering over or they're doing stuff that doesn't feel good to you, it is the first piece I think we need to do is have compassion that they are also protecting themselves, because we all come to parenting with our wounds. We all come with our stories of this wasn't good enough, or I didn't get this need met, or that feels really dangerous for me. So we're always working from protection. And I think that is such an important thing to remember, that nobody's behaving that way because they want to. They're doing it because they're trying to keep themselves safe. And we that applies to children and applies to adults as well. Now, obviously with adults, we hope that we have a bit more awareness to be conscious of what we're doing. But a lot of the time we don't, because we've never been taught about how to navigate that or lean into it. So I think the first piece for me is to be compassionate, to remember that what our partner may be doing, even if it doesn't feel good, is coming from that place of them trying to keep themselves safe. And a lot of the time that is around just this feels this feels too confronting. This feels dangerous for me. I feel out of control. Like there's too much of my own wound here. I need to shut that down. That's where they're coming from, because we can't ever, I think, create healing if we come in hard over the top of what you're doing wrong. This isn't okay, that kind of stuff. So for me, I look at it, it has to come from compassion first. And it just takes one partner in the relationship, one person in the relationship to be able to sit in that place of compassion and understanding to even open the door to create change. Because if we are, you're doing it wrong and you do this, and then the other person's firing back with that, we're just two wounded children having a fight and it's never going to move. So it just takes one person to be able to sit, I think, in their heart and look behind what's going on and say, okay, that's coming from there. So for me, I guess what I've learned over the years is that, you know, in the heat of the moment is never the time to go entering into, and what's going on for you right now, right? Because it's just too up, it's too alive, it's too there. It is always after, and it's in those moments where we do feel connected, that it is time to open up those conversations. And so for me, what I learned with my partner, and he would do the same for me, like this isn't me just being the, you know, aware parenting person saying, hey, what's going on? He would call me out on my stuff. Our kids would call us out on our stuff. Like it was perfect. But it was when often we were connected and it was calm, I would say to him, hey, how do you reckon that went earlier this afternoon with the kids when this happened and that happened, and what did that feel like for you? And so it would slowly be just planting seeds for him to reflect or go, well, yeah, they were pissing me off, or they were doing this or doing that. And I'd be like, yeah, so what was happening for you there? Or I would just gently try to open up a conversation to say, yeah, it didn't feel good. And then I'd bring it back to me, yeah, because I had this feeling. I went into panic because I felt like I had to protect the kids because that's my stuff. So I would own as much of what my own story was, as well as opening up the conversation so that nobody was wrong. It was just, this is what was going on for me. That's what was going on for me. And then that often, again, sometimes it would open up conversation. We could lean into a bit more. Sometimes it wouldn't go anywhere, but I would keep trying. And, you know, and I say to parents often, when we are looking on different pages, you know, one of the best things we can do to start with is just keep modeling what we want, you know, how we want to respond to our kids. We keep modeling it so that they can see, oh, that's actually how it can work and that's what may happen. But I really want to offer, like, this is big stuff, right? And for people who are listening, who are on different pages with their partners and it feels really tense, like this is core work where it asks us to look at our own stories and our wounds. And it's not easy. Like it can feel really hard and really challenging. And that's why I think it is a work in progress. And we've got to be super gentle and kind to ourselves because we're dealing with often our wounds. I mean, as we grew, my husband and I worked through stuff, we would have this thing where when we were being triggered or one of us was, whether it was around the kids or something going on, and as soon as one of us would lose it, or particularly if we both lost it, what I would often say is, how old are you right now? And my husband, he'd be like, I'm 12. And he'd go, how old are you? And I'd be like, I'm 4. Right? So when we were in the middle of the heat of something, we would often ask each other how old we were because we knew that was the parts of us that were popping up. Now, if you were just starting with your partner, that's probably not going to go anywhere good. If you say, how old are you? They're like, what are you talking about? I'm 35. Like, that's not where you start, right? But as we have learned to work through this and own that our wounds are going to surface, you know, that's been such a game changer for us of when we both are really reactive to just call, how old are you? And in that moment when you can own, oh, I feel like a 12-year-old or I feel like a 4-year-old, it helped us in those situations to go, what's going on for you right now? You know, we had an incident once and both my husband and I were popping and I literally just said, how old are you? And he's like 12. And I go, where are you? And he's like, I feel really unsupported. I feel like nobody's here to help me. I don't know what to do. And I'm meant to know and I don't. And I'm like, okay, that's where you are. And he's like, where are you? And I'm like, I feel 4. I feel totally unsafe because nobody's taking care of this. And so then we both literally just sat there, him as a 12-year-old, me as a 4-year-old. And we both kind of went, okay, what do you need? And he's like, I need someone to support me. I need someone to guide me. And I was like, okay. And then he asked me the same question, what do you need? And I was like, I need an adult or I need someone to tell me it's going to be okay and that it's safe. And we basically worked through this process together where we could instantly drop the story. We moved into the wounds that we were, and then it actually dissipated and we were both able to feel it. And then we could come out the other side and go, okay, now what's the possibility of the solution that we can look for? But it's taken a while to get to those points where we can actually both lean into it quickly to know that there's something going on, and so that's been pretty profound.
It sounds profound.
That's awesome. Really amazing. And so I really hear that there's a journey, right? There's a journey for so many parents to get to that place, and that going gently, because the problem is when we're in a wound and we're in reaction, we want to make that feeling go away, right? Which and sometimes make somebody wrong for that. So how would you offer the mother who's in this dynamic with their partner where she's, as part of her protection, making him wrong or his parenting wrong, how does she first be with that feeling in herself to almost kind of create a pattern interrupt to then offer compassion? Because there needs to be a step kind of before you can offer compassion, right?
100%, yes. So I think there's a few different ways to do it, and it depends on what resonates with you. For me personally, whenever I started to feel really reactive or I was going into a story, and I'm very grateful because this was something that I was taught from my mother many years ago. She often, from a really young age, she would say to me, "What is this about for you? Like, what is this? What do you have to feel in this story?" So I was really taught from a young age, whatever's going on, whenever I'm having a reaction, it's about me, right? There's something in me that's not being met. So I feel very lucky that was something that I was taught from a young age, and that has often been my default. And I know that's not usually everyone's default. Our default is to move into blame or move into projection onto someone else as to why what they're doing is making you uncomfortable, right? Whereas really the gift is to go, "Oh, what's going on for me here? There's something." So for me, my first question was always when something I felt, whether it was I felt attacked or whether I felt really vulnerable or whether I felt scared, my first question was always to be, what's going on for me here? And so, and from that, just even asking that question, it brought it back to, I'm having a reaction around something, and I need to own this reaction. So sometimes I would take that and go and journal, and just, if I could, I'd go and just write a train of thought. This is what I'm feeling right now, and see what came out of that. Sometimes it's ringing a friend and just saying, "Can you listen to me for a moment? Because I'm feeling really, really reactive and I've got something going on." And through talking, I'd be able to kind of then process, hey, I'm feeling scared, or I'm feeling threatened, or I'm feeling powerless, or whatever it was, by having a dialogue. And I am a speaker. Like, I need to talk to people. When something's going on for me, I'll even ring a friend and say, "Can you just ask me these 3 questions?" Because when someone asks them, it feels easier for me to respond than sometimes just trying to do it in my head. So sometimes it's going and talking to someone. Sometimes you can't do that in a minute because the kids are there and partner and all that kind of stuff. And for me, it was often, I need to take a pause. So if I am feeling something, I am going to just almost get quiet for a minute and go, I'm having a response. I'm having a big reaction. I need to just sit with that for a minute to see where that's taking me. So I think the first piece is, what do we have to own in ourselves before we start projecting onto where that is, that other person? What is this? And this for me is the fundamental core of all this work. If we can't own our own story, we're not going to create shifts. And I think, particularly in, I guess, a conscious parenting dynamic, when we can see the story that's going on, and often women do, because they often do a lot more research, or they do more self-discovery stuff, or we're made to do self-discovery stuff because we have to, we're the ones that get pregnant and have the babies, and you're pushed into those places. And so on some level, you do a lot more of that process work. I think we naturally default to questioning and asking more than what men do, unless they've had to really, move through those rites of passage themselves to really, have that inquiry. And I think it is very easy, of course, just to project onto that other person of what it is. But if you can firstly come back to, okay, what is going on for me here? And whether it is, I feel really angry because you are acting like a child, well, that's good. You've got anger going on. You're feeling angry. And what need of that is there for you? Or what does that remind you of? Or what is coming up as part of your story of what that feels unsafe? And I think the key piece of this is that we come together with our partners to work through our wounds, whether we like it or not. We think we come together because we're going to build a life and we're going to love each other and it's going to be magical and we'll have great sex. But often we come together because they're the perfect person to mirror back to you the stuff that you need to work with, right? It doesn't sound very romantic at all, does it? But that's who we often choose, because they are the perfect people somewhere in our psyche, in safety, to say, hey, I'm going to help you look at your shadow here. And I think for me, the biggest piece is firstly having the willingness and the consciousness to go, there's something going on for me here. And so, for me, whenever I'm working with someone and when they're wanting to say, my partner doesn't do this and partner doesn't do that, I'm like, let's not talk about your partner. It's not about your partner. It's about you. What's happening here right now? And when we can at least get our piece of the story, then that allows us to move into more spaciousness and compassion to perhaps hold a space for our partner to move into their stuff. But we can't do it unless we own ours first.
So great. How would you talk about or explain wounds coming up in your partner to the partner that perhaps doesn't recognize that they have wounds or that they even arise?
Yeah. This is tricky. It's not easy because, again, we all sit at different levels of awareness and we all sit at different levels of wanting to know. I mean, I think that sometimes the key piece with a lot of couples I work with is, and that's why I always come back to the first piece of doing the work for you. What I believe or what I look at is that it just takes one person in the partnership to start doing the work. And I think we come together as the perfect polarities, and that when one person is doing the work, as they're expanding and growing, that other person's either going to be on some level forced to do the work and wake up and move, or they won't. And it'll become very apparent whether you're meant to be together or not. Now, that sounds quite terrifying if you're sitting there going, but, we've created this family and all those kind of things. But I think we're so conditioned to keep ourselves small, and I think we're so conditioned to keep ourselves safe and comfortable, or what we believe to be safe and comfortable, by not owning who we are and our power. And I think what I often see in parenting is that, particularly in women, as they wake up and as they go, whoa, there's more to this, and they're doing that self-process work, they're looking to their partner to say, hey, come with me, like, let's do this together. And sometimes they will and sometimes they won't. And we can't make them. And I think at the end of the day, it has to come back to the only commitment is to yourself, to keep growing and doing the work. And my husband and I absolutely reached this point a few times in our relationship where we had been stuck in our story. And I'm like, nah, I'm not up for this. I am up for a big, powerful life. We've got to do the work. And I remember saying to him, I'm shifting and I want you to come with me. Like, I want to do it. And I remember him going, I will never hold you back. Like, you go do what you need to do. And I'm like, no, you freaking do the work and come with me. Like, come on, you can do it. And he'd be like, okay. And we have this joke and dynamic. He's always like, Lael goes and does the stuff and she goes, come on, babe. And he goes, okay. And then he'll move, right? But we know this in our dynamic of when we often get stuck. For me, that just is who I am. I'm going and doing the stuff. And then I go, hey, let's lift. And he goes, okay. And he'll do it. And he has beautiful willingness to do it. But I have worked with a lot of people who they just can't, or they're not ready, or they don't want to. And that is not wrong. That is absolutely okay. We are just all in our own different paths. And sometimes we come together with a partner to perhaps create children or do that piece of work of healing. And then we grow and we move. I think the key piece that's really challenging is that when we believe that we should be able to make them do the work and make them move. And if we're not doing that right, then we're getting that wrong. But we are not responsible for anybody else except ourselves. And if somebody wants to grow and do the work, they will. And if they don't, they don't. And our where we've got to come back to within ourselves is, our commitment to ourselves to keep growing and expanding. And whether they come or not is the challenge of where we move to. But I think the more we tune in to going, well, what is this for me and where do I want to be and how do I want to walk on this earth? That is what I am committed to doing. And I ideally would love a partner who can stand beside me within that, but I can't make them. And they're also not wrong if they don't want to.
That's grace right there, isn't it? That you can own your story and unravel your story and your growth and allow them theirs, whether it's with you or with you that you want or not.
And look, there's been many times, both, and again, I would say my husband has said the exact same stuff back to me as I've said to him in this, where both of us have been stuck or we've been frightened or we've been in the story. And, how I've turned up to Mike, I've looked him in the eye and said, I see who you are. I see the power of who you are. I know you are magnificent and there is so much more and perhaps you're scared and whatever. And if all I can do is just keep seeing you in the powerful version of you, then that's what I'm going to do until you remember that. And he said the same to me. And that's often where we've sometimes had to get to. And that's all we can do. But when we're starting at the very beginning, right, when we're realizing perhaps we're on different paths with parenting or where we are in the relationship, you know, those conversations probably aren't happening just yet. It really just is about, hey, I can see that you're feeling really activated. So am I. How about we talk about it? It's just calling, saying what we see. Or it's, I can see that we're, you know, the places where we fight is around parenting and how we should do it. Should we go and talk to someone and see if they can help us unpack a bit of our stories? And sometimes we need that third person to hold that space for us to be able to look at our wounds, because it's too confronting to do it with each other, because we often play each other's parents, you know. So I think that when we're starting at the very beginning, it is often about, how do we get the support to do this? How do we just even identify it doesn't feel good? It doesn't feel good in our relationship fighting like this. And I don't want that to be that. I want us to feel good and harmonious. So what can we do? What are you willing to do so we can take those little steps forward?
What does it mean, or how do you see it play out, that when the parents don't own their own story, the kids play it out?
Yeah. So I think our children, I come back to this, is that our kids are far closer to the truth of who they are than what we are as adults, because it hasn't been conditioned out of them just yet, right? So, you know, in the truth of who we all are, which is that we are all enough and we are all amazing and we're all incredible, and our children come in on that wave. Sorry, excuse me. And basically, you know, they know what it feels like to feel in balance and feel in alignment. And so when they are responding to their environment, which is what they do all the time, and it feels not so great, then what's going to happen is they're going to behave in certain ways to get our attention, to push those beautiful buttons in us to help us do the work so they can feel good again. So it's, you know, I always look at it this way: is whenever we're having a reaction as a parent, and you guys talk about this all the time, you know, this beautiful stuff of when we're reacting as a parent, it's about us. There's something going on for us. Now, sometimes we're reactive because we're tired and we haven't eaten, and, you know, we just, you know, we're feeling frustrated, right? We've got those basic needs that we feel reactive with. But when we are reacting in big ways, or with something that our child keeps doing again, and again, you know, then there's an opportunity to lean into, what is this about for me? Is this part of my own past coming up? Is this a wound from my own childhood that's being asked to be looked at? And I see this so often when we can get the story, when whatever our 15-year-old is doing that's totally driving us nuts, and we can lean into it. When we shift that, our 15-year-old shifts, or our 2-year-old, you know, when they keep throwing stuff all the time, or they're doing stuff and it's bringing up our feelings of powerlessness or whatever it is, and we get to do the work on that, then the child's behavior shifts, because it's almost like the child goes, oh, good job, well done, thank you. That's one less thing I have to carry of yours forward. Because I think what we do as parents is we unconsciously take our stories and our wounds and we project them onto our kids. And our kids go, hey, I don't want this. And so they push them back, and they push them back with their behavior, and they push them back to us and saying, hey, this is not mine. And you need to shift and move. Because actually what I want is, I want a parent who can own their story, and I want a parent who can be this really safe container for me to be who I need to be. And then when I'm free to be who I need to be, then I'm so much more in balance, and I'm so much more, you know, going to travel through life with a lot more ease and grace. But again, these are big things that we were never modeled. Like, it's rare that I work with a parent who had a parent who raised them like this. So when we are doing this, you know, this is first generation on some level, parenting with consciousness. It's hard, and it's big, and it's making us look at our stuff. And I look at it this way: is like, my kids are still going to have story. I just hope they don't have as much as what I do. And they don't. I can see it already in them. You know, they are so quick to move into their feelings and express them and get their needs met. They are all deeply connected to who they are and their truth. Like, they do not get swayed by what other people think. Like, they are just like, they've got clarity of who they are, because there's been that freedom for them to feel and to be who they need to be in the world. And because I've had to keep looking at my stuff going, oh, what am I projecting onto them? Or what do I need to own? And the more we can do our own work, the less our kids have to carry forward. And I think that is the greatest gift that we can give them.
Amen. what does it look, I guess, what does support look like when you talk about, this stuff comes up and that, it's really hard and we don't have a narrative, a framework or support in order to navigate that in a wholesome, wholehearted way. What does support look like?
I think it can look like many things. I think for some people, it can be having just stillness to journal or to write or to sit with yourself to really feel into what am I feeling. Like for some people, that's their process. For some people, it's moving their body and that helps them, integrate or figure out what's going on for them. That could be going for a run for someone. That could be dancing for someone else. It could be yoga. Could be boxing. God, I love boxing. Boxing's so great as a mother. Don't you think it should be standard mother practice? It's just the best. I think it also it's having community. It's having other mothers that we can lean into and say, gosh, I'm feeling really activated about my partner, or my 4-year-old's really doing my head in because of this, this and this. And it's having the opportunity to be heard without judgment and just talk it through, and to have somebody else just sit down and offer you that empathy and compassion can help you get to your story, to help you see what it is that's going on for you. And when they sit there without judgment and they listen with beautiful compassion, it gives us the opportunity to lean into whatever it is for us so we can move it. And then, we're like, oh, I've just moved that piece, it shifts. Or it is sometimes professional help. It's, I believe that everyone should have therapy at some point in their life, because we need to have a safe container to work through our stories and wounds. And if we haven't, then having kids is just going to bring it up for you. It just is. It's impossible not to. If you want to know what your story is, then just look what's happening in your family, or go hang out with your parents for a week. Either two of those will show you,
really.
Oh, in the same time. I think that it looks different things for different people. And, I'm absolutely a talker. I process through talking. So I have to talk to someone about whatever's going on for me. And sometimes I have to talk to 2 different people, depending on what is going on, to actually just hear myself within it, or get some feedback and to feel into what it is that I need to do. And I think it's being attuned to what helps you own your piece of the story, help move the wound and feel whatever it is so you can find your way back to the center. So I think it's individual, but I think I really believe we need other people to hold that space for us to help us move.
Do you have any questions before we move into our quick fire?
I don't. Do you have anything else you would love to offer, Lael, before we move into those questions?
Particularly on this topic, I just want to come back to that it is delicate and challenging. And I think for any of your beautiful people who are listening, it can feel sometimes really, really tricky when we're in a dynamic or relationship where perhaps one person's not owning it, or we're coming from different places. And I always come back to that sometimes when things feel really hard, sometimes the only thing we can do is to put a little, I say the word prayer, but I'm not meaning in a religious sense, a little prayer out there in the sense of just like, I am really willing to do the healing work or create harmony in our family. And sometimes that's all we can do, is just put it out there to say, that's what I'm willing to have. And I don't know how that's going to look, but I'm really, really willing to move towards it. And then it might be that just something happens, your partner has a conversation with someone and says, gosh, do I do that in our relationship? And you're like, oh, well, let's have a chat about this. Or it might be that they're willing to go and talk to someone, or I don't know. I think it is sometimes when it does feel really hard, it's coming back to sometimes just going, okay, I'm really willing for this to change. I don't know how that's going to look, but that's what I want. What I want this to look like is a relationship where we do meet deeply, where we are aligned with our parenting, all those kind of things. So for people that are feeling sometimes that it is so hard, sometimes the first step is just going, well, what do I want this to look like? And what am I willing to have? And I'm going to put that out there and see what happens.
Thank you. So we'll move into our 3 quick fire questions that we ask every podcast guest. So I wonder to start off, Lael, if there's a time that you can think about that you would be comfortable and willing to share where you have experienced a wound or a challenge and you have transformed that into wisdom. And what we're hoping you might consider doing is sharing with us the wound, how you transformed it, and absolutely what your deeply lived experience has allowed you to gain the wisdom of?
That's such a good question. I love that. Yeah, for me, absolutely, it was the birth of my third child. I went into an experience, I worked in birth. I was really ready to have this profound orgasmic birth experience in the bush. I basically put it out there that this birth experience was going to show me the woman I am. I just really want to say to everyone, don't ever say that.
Be careful what you wish for.
You're going to get one thing, and then when it comes back, and ended up having, beautiful, gorgeous story, breech baby, undiagnosed, ended up in hospital, long labor, ended up with emergency cesarean. And for me, I was a birth worker. I taught calm birth. That seemed, all my ego came up around, oh my God, I failed, got it wrong. Anyway, her journey was so big. She was born not breathing and was resuscitated for nearly 10 minutes, wasn't expected to live. And I was really in a life and death situation as well. Like, we both went to the edge of life and death. So we had pretty massive trauma. She was in a coma for like the first 4 or 5 days of her life. Like, just all the big, story that has impact on connection and attachment and bonding and all that kind of stuff. And so huge, massive experience that just kind of blew me out of the water of what I thought. And when I said, I want this experience to show me the woman I am, it did. Oh my God, it did, because it brought me to my knees. It taught me about surrender like I had never experienced before. It taught me about letting go of these perceived ideas of what things should look like. It was transforming, but it was also really traumatic and big. So, we both came through that experience. We got home. I knew enough to know that we both had trauma. It's actually then what got me onto aware parenting, because I just was like, how am I going to help her move her trauma? How am I going to help myself? And that's when I discovered Aletha Salter's book. And that's where I began to go, whoa, there's a whole lot of feelings here that I haven't dealt with. And so there was the trauma, the big experience. And then I kind of, got on with life and moved through. And about 2.5 years later, when she was about 2.5, I hit full blown PTSD. And so it was like, now enough time had passed and, everybody was okay, that I could actually then begin to feel and unpack what happened in that story. And I went from what I feel like was a fully, wonderfully functioning mother of 3 kids. I was running workshops, doing all that stuff, to having a full-blown PTSD attack where I couldn't work. I didn't work for nearly a year. I had to feel all the trauma of everything, but not just from that experience, but I think from my life of what I hadn't dealt with. So I moved into full-on anxiety and panic. I cried a lot. I barely could function. And I knew that this was the point where I had to heal, and I had to learn about vulnerability, and I had to learn about compassion, and I had to do a whole lot of healing work to find my way back. And it was hard, and it was full on. And it was also the best thing that ever happened to me, because it took me to where my work is now. It helped me understand trauma. It gifted me with so much compassion for people and their stories. I absolutely admit, before that, I thought mental health was just, you just need to deal with more stuff. And, I was at the point where I wanted to be medicated. I didn't want to live. Like, I was really in trauma story. So having this incredible lived experience of what it was like on the other side was so profound and hard. Like, it was not easy. And many times I was like, I want this to be over. I don't want to do it anymore. But every therapy session I had, every bit of body work I did, every little piece brought me back home to me and actually showed me the truth of who I was. Like, I actually got what I asked for, right? It was to show me the woman I am. So it was the greatest gift. And I would not change one single bit of it, because I think it's got me to where I am now. And I just see it as absolute perfection in what happened. And, I think, I don't know, I feel like I could write a whole book on that story and what it showed me. But I look at my baby and my beautiful girl now who's 13, and I just think, this was part of our journey together and part of her story and my story to bring me home to who I am. And so that, I just feel it was the greatest gift I could have been given.
Do you mind if I ask a little nuanced question?
Go.
So I'm also equally fascinated by the fact that our greatest revelations come out or are born out of our greatest pain. And yet it is a rare human who is willing or wanting to accept that degree of pain in order to receive that degree of enlightenment. So what I see more often than not is the pain arises and I'm going to like do a U-turn on that. I don't know, I'm just fascinated by that. And instead you were like, I'm here and I'm getting medicine out of this. I don't know, like, I don't know if I even have a specific question. More, I'm just like, how do you talk to people about that segue, meeting point, crossroads?
For me, I love what you're saying, because I tried really hard to move away from it. Like, I tried hard to numb it. Let me tell you, I tried everything to go, no, you're fine. Like, this doesn't, I did that until I went, well, that doesn't bloody work. So I'm still feeling how I'm feeling. I remember the day it turned around. I remember it so well. It was such a pivotal point. I was actually at a 5 Rhythms dance class. If anyone's done 5 Rhythms, they'll know how fabulous and crazy and hippie it is sometimes, right? And it's in its weirdness. It's great. And I'm in a 5 Rhythms class with, a whole massive group of strangers, and everyone's dancing and the instructor, I'll never forget this. She's talking about hands, right? And she says this thing where she goes, when you're dancing, don't abandon your hands. Like, they exist. They're part of your arms. Like, don't abandon it. And when something just says something to you and you're just like, oh my God. And in that moment, I was fully taken with, oh my God, I am abandoning my trauma. I am trying to turn away from it. I am trying to pretend my anxiety doesn't exist. I have abandoned that part of myself because it's too painful. And I physically even turned my body almost like my trauma was sitting there, and I went, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You're a part of me and I've abandoned you. I've like turned away from you because I don't want to feel it. But come, I'm here. It's okay. You're allowed to be here. You're allowed to exist. And that was the moment it started changing, because instead of running away from it and instead of making it bad and wrong and I shouldn't be feeling it, I actually leant into it and went, oh, you're just a part of me, and maybe you'll be a part of me for the rest of my life. And that's okay. You don't get to now drive the car that tells me where I need to go, but you can be here, and that's okay. And it was in that moment that everything changed, because I realized the way through is not to try and distract or push down or not feel. It is to lean in, and it is to say thank you, and it is to say, what have you got to tell me? And it was that moment that it all started to change, because it lessens its grip on me. It just wanted to be heard. It just wanted a voice. And so then I just leant into the vulnerability and the anxiety and the panic and all of it. And instead of judging it, I just welcomed it, and I sat with it, and I would have conversations with it, and I would cuddle it, and I'd say, thank you for showing me what you need to show me. And that's where I think it transformed.
Thank you for that story. I had full blown ripples of just gratitude moving through my body and just eye weeping tears, which I just think that's a really potent moment. So, and it feels sacred. So thank you for sharing that. Do you mind if I asked one tiny more nuanced question? Because I'm fascinated by this. Is how do you do that and still parent?
That was my question.
Oh, was that going to be your question?
That's the same question.
Yeah. Well, that was hard.
You're a conscious parent. You want to be there for your child. So how can you lean into that and still be a parent?
Yeah. So for me, at that period of my life, I had to simplify everything. I had to take away all the things that were hard, because I knew that my healing was so important, and that my 2 jobs were I have to heal and look after my kids at the same time. So that was huge for me, because I am a go-getter and a doer, and I am like action woman, right? So I'm like, yeah, what can we create and build and all that kind of stuff. And it was the season of my life where I actually had to stop that and say, this is the time where I actually just have to focus on healing and my children. So for me, it was about actually learning to say no, firstly, to anything that felt remotely stressful to me or that felt like it was going to ask more of me. I actually said no. And that was challenging, because I am out in the world, and it went against all the parts of the part of me that wanted to do it. But I actually then just went, no, this is just for now. Like, you need to do this healing just now. So I actually simplified as much as I could. I would own where I was. So when I was feeling really worried or I was feeling really sad, my kids would often come in and go, "Are you okay, mummy?" And instead of saying, "Yeah, I'm fine, I'm okay," I'd go, "I'm feeling really sad today. And so I'm going to go and ring my friend Rach because I just need to talk about my sad a little bit, but I'm going to be okay, but I need to, that's how I am." So I learned to be actually authentic with my kids, and they totally accepted it, because I think a lot of the time before that, wherever I was feeling, they would, kids are tuned to us, right? So they'd come and go, "You okay?" And when we go, "Yeah," they'd be like, "No, you're not." So I actually learned to just be real and go, "Mummy's feeling big feelings today. And what I'm going to do is this to take care of them. But I'm still here for you." So I learned to actually just be real. And the more real I was and the more I would lean into taking care of myself, the more spaciousness my kids were like, "Yeah, okay, no worries." So it didn't become scary. Whereas when I wasn't owning it, that's when they were feeling there is real incongruency here. And that makes me feel unsafe. And that's when I'd see them act out more. So I was modeling to them, yeah, I don't feel okay, but this is what I'm going to do to take care of my needs, which I think was powerful, because we were beginning to see they were having this imprint around, yes, you have to model what that looks like when we don't feel good. What do we need to lean into? So firstly, I was going to do that. Secondly, I was being authentic to myself, which is all our kids ever want. They want the authentic version of ourselves, even if it is messy. It's better than the, cultivated version of ourselves, because then they're like, this doesn't feel right. My body's saying one thing and you're saying something else. So I think that was that. And I asked for help a lot. I just all of a sudden, I had a big martyr story in my mothering journey that I should be able to do it all. And I was really rubbish at asking for help. And then when I kind of got brought to my knees, I was like, I can't do this without help. And so I asked for help, and I asked my mum and my mother-in-law would look after the kids. I would ring my friends some days and say, "I'm having a really bad day. Could you take the kids?" And I said yes to all the help that I could get for the times when it was tricky. And so it was not easy. It was hard. But the more I lent into owning and being real with my own stuff, it's almost like the freer my kids became, because they were like, "You're doing the work, Mum. Well done." That's what it felt like a lot of the time. And again, there were heaps of times where it didn't look like that. It was really messy and it was horrible. And there was times I was like, this just feels really hard. But then there are other times where I could see the light come and it was all right.
So much for sharing that. Our next question is, what are the books that you feel everybody should read in their lifetime, or the book that's been most influential for you?
Oh, God, this is another really good. I love these questions. They're so good. I was really thinking about this question because there's been different books, have phases in my life that have been like, they're like, whoa, open you up to the new pieces. I think in my early and my teen years, like I came across, I don't know if you know Jonathan Livingston Seagull, his book One. It was like this spiritual book. Like that was kind of one of the first spiritual books I read that I was like, whoa, there's so much more out here. And I think then reading things like the Celestine Prophecy when I was like 19 or 20, I was just like, that resonated with me. I think then moving into the phase of my life where I worked in birth, I came across Ina May Gaskin's work, and I think spiritual midwifery really was like, oh, wow, this is how life could be. That was a huge turning point for me. Aletha Salter's book, The Aware Baby, was again a huge revelation for me around a whole other way of being. Like that really held me. Naomi Wolf's book, Vagina, which I just like, if anyone says to me, what book should everyone read? I actually think that's the book for me, because I think when it talks about women, their bodies, our power, that kind of stuff, for me, that was one of the books where I just would read a page or two and then I'd have to ring someone and tell them what I've just read. I was so like, oh my God, I was so opened by that book. I mean, look, there are so many magnificent books and authors out there. It's really hard to pick, isn't it? But I think in reflection of where my life has been and what has influenced me, they're probably the ones that have taken me on the path to like, wow, this is revolutionary. Also, I would say David Data's book, Intimate Communion, was also another big game changer for me in my relationship. So I think they're the ones that have been the books that have absolutely opened my eyes to what is possible in a different way and led me on different paths.
Beautiful examples. Thank you. And the last question is, if you could have a billboard anywhere on a highway, what would it say?
It would say, remember who you are. For me, you know, over all these years of doing this work, I think I've got to a point where it comes back to the same place in anybody I ever work with, which is that our job is just to remember the truth of who we are. And the truth of who we are is that we are enough and we are extraordinary, and that that the spirit of all of who we are is just so beautiful and profound. And we've all forgotten that. And I think the work is to come back to remembering that, because when we can come back to remember that, or even glimpse it, or even work towards what that could look like, then it means that we're in alignment with who we are and our truth, and then everything flows from there. So, you know, the older I get and the longer I do this work, I just come back to that. That's what we want to do with our parenting, is create space for our kids to know who they are. And part of that is us remembering who we are.
Thank you, Lael. I feel like we've just had the most profound journey around 100 suns. So it's such a delight and a pleasure to our hearts and our souls to have you here and in this space, having profound conversations. And we're so deeply moved and grateful that you're coming in to have a deeper and extended conversation with our little community of equally lit up women and mothers. So again, thank you very much for that. We would love for you to share with our podcast listeners where they can go deeper with you, how they can go deeper with you, and where they would find you and connect with you.
Thank you. So I'm on social medias. You know, there's not many people called Lael, so I'm pretty easy to find. So you can find me, Lael Stone. So my website's laelstone.com.au.
I'll just say Lael, L-A-E-L.
Yeah, Lael Stone. So you can find me on social media there. So we also have the Aware Parenting podcast, where we talk about all parenting stuff. I also have woodlineprimary.com.au, which is a school that we opened this year, which is all based around awareness and connection. And I guess, you know, for many people, the school that we wished we all could have gone to, or that we want for our kids. So that's woodlineprimary.com.au. And I still have a birth program too, which, even though I don't work in birth anymore, which is aboutbirth.com.au, and that's got for pregnancy. That's all just, you know, for women wanting birth education. For me though, really, I'm not seeing so much one-on-one people as much anymore, because I'm doing a lot more talking and speaking gigs. But I do have online courses that people can do. So I have an Aware Parenting immersion that's coming up in a month or so, which is like an 8-week journey. And I also have a couples course on my website, which is for parents to journey a bit deeper into their own stories and imprints, you know, and parenting.
So much richness. I just actually even love hearing the journey of your career. Like it's just so evolutions of alignment and purpose, isn't it? Like how absolutely glorious. You've done it all whilst consciously raising 3 children, and having an intimate relationship. Like it's amazing.
I love about myself that I just can't do stuff unless I'm passionate about it. And what I have loved and learned is that through my journeys of my life, so it's taken me into my work. Like I just live what I needed to learn. So that's where I worked in birth for so long, and then had to work in trauma to understand that, and then worked into parenting. And then when my kids became teenagers, you know, I did lots of work around sex ed and working with teens, because I was like, oh my God, I've got to get that right. And so for me, it has been just following the journey of my parenting and my kids. You know, I'll get to work in death next. I'll do that. I'm working all the way through these other things. I'll work to the end part. So we'll see. Yeah.
Oh, Lael, thank you so much. What an absolute delight it has been to have this conversation with you.
Thank you for having me, beautiful ladies. Thank you.
And to connect with you, Bridget,
is bridgetwood.life, and you, Jules,
is julietenner.love.
Remember to nourish the woman, to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.